Thank you so much for joining us today. I have Amanda Larson. She's an expert in content marketing and digital branding. We're going to be talking about a few different subjects today, but I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us, Amanda.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
The biggest thing when we kind of got started was the purpose of brand loyalty. It's one of those words that gets thrown around a lot, and I know I don't really understand it all that well. Can you kind of give us a base version so that we can build on that?
Yeah, I think brand loyalty is just the idea that, of course, we have those hero products in our lives. Whether we've been eating our favorite cereal since we were kids or buying the same toothpaste our whole life, we have those certain brands that make a daily occurrence in our life. And with the rise of social media and brands being able to share their story, and the beauty of social media is, for the first time, rather than just advertising, a one-way street, we now have a two-way channel where consumers can engage with brands. And so I think the brand loyalty is taking a whole new level because brands are able to talk with consumers one-on-one on social media. So brand loyalty is a huge thing, and brands are capitalizing on it with social media and things like that.
Cool. There's so many different kind of things coming out now where existing companies that were around for 50 years, Coca-Cola is using high fructose corn syrup and they get hammered for that. There's a lot that goes into having an established brand that's inherently risky with these, always, the world is changing so fast, and this is now bad and that's now bad, and this is the fad and this is the sweetener that works. How can loyalty marketing and brand loyalty be impacted by those emerging fads and the changing tastes?
I think it's changing a lot because for the first time, a lot more people are beginning businesses, and a lot of people are seeing gaps in the market that the giant industries have missed. So I think that a lot of small brands have taken these innovative ideas and made a product out of it, and they're almost forcing the hands of bigger brands to have to follow suit. So, for example, smaller brands making a more ethical, smarter, more sustainable product, and they're really forcing the bigger brands to have to make those changes because consumers are smart and they want to do good, they want to make the right decisions, they want to buy the new product, and so
with machine learning and AI coming on board, how is that going to affect how brands are interacting with consumers?
I think that a lot of brands are interacting with consumers in an automated way. Yeah. And I think that's actually a really big opportunity for small businesses to make an impact with consumers.
That's interesting.
So many big brands, they deal with numbers, they deal with big quantities and things like that. Chatbots, were a huge thing in 2019. And I think that a lot of it is lost. The one-on-one is so valuable and so important that smaller brands can really capitalize on that. So I think with AI coming in, it's brilliant and it's wonderful and it's automated and it's a great thing to be able to, write all of your social media or schedule all your content at once and then let it run. But it's really important to check in daily, interact with people on a daily basis, and have those conversations online.
Yeah, I don't know if you've dealt with chatbots too much, but I used one, I think earlier this year. It might have been with my bank or with a credit card. It was so bad, and it was laughable. It was so bad. So hopefully there's easier ways to get information in the future, because 10 years ago we had to deal with really bad dialing through the phone, and even now you have to go through 10 different menus to get to a human. So there's a lot of times where automation does not better the customer experience.
It does not, no. But that's where a great, place is for content marketing and really buffing out even a simple FAQ page on a website and really answering those questions that people are asking regularly and just being transparent and being as honest and upfront as possible. Take the automation out of it and give people the information that they're looking for.
Yeah, so because a lot of the times I find that Google answers it. I think 50 or 60% of Google searches now are answered by the SERP page, by the search results page.
Wow.
So people aren't clicking on the websites anymore to answer because they're indexing it and just delivering the content.
Right. When you have Alexa in your house or the Google Home, there's so many, the robots in our life to answer questions. So
yeah, well, that's a different subject. I don't believe in
right.
putting the microphones in, but as far as if you are an independent retailer, back to the core of small business, how do you screw up branding? What are the most common mistakes that maybe a smaller company can make, when they're developing this online brand or in-person brand?
Some of the most common mistakes that I see with some of my clients or small businesses that I work with is, first of all, having a brand guideline. It's a very simple, exercise to do by yourself or with your team, but basically just, writing down exactly who you are and what you're trying to do, who you're trying to be there for. And, even simply having a color scheme, having a logo that looks professional. There's so many, outsourcing websites like Design Crowd and places that you can crowdsource cheap logos to look professional and good. And I think that so many people kind of try to cut corners there, and it's so apparent, especially online. Yeah. Another problem with retail or small businesses in general is that they don't have continuity across platforms. So, maybe let's say they updated their website and it looks really nice, but they haven't updated their social media profiles to match. And so, especially with social media profiles, having big cover photos and, really promoting imagery, it's important to make everything match and look cohesive. So when someone, sees an ad or clicks onto you from their mobile device, they go to a place that looks like what they clicked on. So I think having everything kind of match one another, as simple as that is really, really important.
Now, once they get, that customer acquisition or they get that interest, how can a brand kind of turn that into retention? How can they build that brand loyalty that the 50-year-old companies have?
Sure. I think today the answer to that is content marketing. Okay. And I think having a strong content plan for your consumer, because your customer journey doesn't end at the transaction. You want people to come back, right? And so content marketing allows you to stay in touch with people after that point of sale or even long before. And so I think you can get really creative in terms of, sharing education and educating your consumer, because what is, very obvious to you as a business owner is completely remarkable to somebody else. We're down in the trenches. We hear our industry jargon every single day, and somebody else has maybe never encountered this problem ever before, and they're looking to you to be the industry expert. And so I think that, sorry. I think that having a strong content marketing strategy is going to be able to keep you on track. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. No. That doorbell scared me.
As far as content marketing, if I could pause you for a second, what is content marketing as far as an independent retailer or independent brand? What does that mean to them? Is that social media? Is it a tweet? Is it blogging on their website? What are different forms of content marketing?
I think the most common way to describe content marketing is storytelling. It's the idea that you're putting a human behind your brand or your product or your service. It's telling people what your mission is, who you actually are, why you created what you created, and telling the story. And that's, people fall in love with brands, and people follow brands that they love, and people stay loyal to brands that they love. So by having a content marketing strategy that is enjoyed by the consumer, they're not just sold to, they're part of your story, they're on this journey with you, they're helping you build future products. It's creating a sense of community, and that's where content marketing is so important.
Okay, so it can resonate over whether it be YouTube or social media, or a number of
it can, of course, it can go across platform to platform. The great thing about content marketing is that I'm a huge fan of recycling content. So let's say that you write a blog post, right? Takes a few hours, but the great thing about that is that it can be translated into so many different things. It can be made into a video on YouTube. It can be made into a quick Instagram story. It can be made into infinite social posts. You can make an infographic from it. You can reuse, multiple blog posts over time that are, say, related over one subject and turn it into a downloadable ebook or some sort of, one-sheeter on your website. There's so many ways to recycle content that, a small brainstorming session to come up with a couple ideas can actually be a really great long-term strategy.
Interesting. And so how can people make that simple? Because, that's really a job in and of itself, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the first questions I get from businesses I talk to is they're like, what do I talk about? How do I, what do people want to know? You can Google anything these days. And I kind of go back to the point of what's obvious to us is something new for somebody else. And a great place that I recommend people to go to are websites like Quora or message forums, because you Google the common problems that maybe your brand is a solution to, and see what people are talking about. See how people refer to the problem, because maybe people don't know, the proper term of what's going on or something. And so when people don't even know how to Google that, but instead you can, find that problem on a message board and really see how people are talking. So
when you're speaking to those brands, what's the most frequent area that they miss, when they're doing it on their own? Where do they kind of pull back, and where's the biggest area that they can improve usually?
I think the biggest thing is people bite off more than they can chew.
Okay.
For example, with social media, a lot of people think they have to be everywhere to be successful, and it's not true at all. If you are going to do social media at all, only do it on one or two platforms. Do it on the one platform that your target demographic is using the most common, or the most often. So I think that the biggest gap is, spreading yourself too thin. It's all types of marketing, digital content, social media, it's all super time consuming. And obviously business owners have a million other things to deal with. They're running a business. And so you should be doing something that you're good at and focusing on what really, really matters. And so rather than spreading yourself thin, focus your efforts on 1 to 2 channels that are really going to produce efforts for you, or produce results for you. And at the same time, once you make that commitment, don't stop, because so many people say they're going to do a weekly newsletter, for example, in email marketing, and then it lasts for a few weeks and then turns bi-weekly and then they kind of forget. And so if you're going to do something, commit to it, or be transparent that it's going to be sporadic, or, just be upfront with your users so that your audience doesn't sign up for something and then suddenly you ghost them.
That's interesting. And because there are so many different paths there, there's so many different ways to bring a message through. When we're talking about digital media, it's just such a large area to cover. What areas are the most effective? I know we were speaking earlier about Facebook and the changes that they're having. Where should you invest your time if you're a small brand right now?
If you're a small brand, I think the smartest thing you can do is figure out where your leads are coming from, and figure out kind of, for example, first of all, you should take a step back, figure out exactly what your goals are as a company, whether you're trying to get in front of people and grow your brand awareness, or whether you're trying to, capture leads online that convert into sales. Kind of figure out what that goal is and then build your strategy from there.
How do you find out where your leads are coming from?
So one of the best tools I personally think is Google Analytics. It can be plugged into any website. Ask a tech webmaster or somebody for help if you don't know what you're doing, or YouTube University, and figure it out. But Google Analytics is incredible because it does share with you the referral traffic of where people are coming from and how they're landing on your page. So you might think, social media is great and that you're getting all these leads from social media, when in reality, it's actually email traffic, or it's referral traffic, or Google searches that's driving it. So I think the smartest thing you can do is figure out exactly where your leads are coming from digitally, and then focus on those outlets the most.
And is it always a good idea to try to throw money behind that? So let's say I was getting traffic from Instagram. Should I start advertising on Instagram?
Yes and no. Unfortunately, with many of the new algorithm changes happening, it's very hard to get organic impressions. So that means free impressions, right? So getting shares and promoting that engagement and getting more reach for free. It's much more difficult now. So putting money behind it is really the only guaranteed way to get in front of more people. I do think that social media or Instagram, for example, advertising is really important because as well as getting in front of more people and getting results, at the same time, it's actually a really great testing environment because you can figure out exactly who is engaging with your ads. You might think that your target demographic or consumer is one thing, and you run an ad campaign and you find out that, wow, actually it's 29 to 34-year-olds were clicking my ad the most. So then maybe moving on in the future, that's where you put your money. So I think that they can actually be really, really important learning tools for companies. So I think investing some money and figuring out, but only small amounts at a time until you really, really learn what you're doing. So that, or you hire help, because when I've seen a lot of companies, they're like, I threw thousands of dollars at Facebook and I have nothing to show for it. And unfortunately, it's a huge, huge beast. And unless you exactly know what you're doing, it's very difficult. So it is a place where hired help I would recommend it.
No, that makes sense. It's one of those areas where I think we're through seeing the end of free digital media. Is there any free platforms where a brand can jump on and actually make a splash without investing?
Of course, I think that the great thing about social media is that it creates an online community. It creates social proof of your product. If you can get people talking about you, then I think that's half the battle. And that's referral traffic, and using something because your friends use it is going to be the strongest form of brand loyalty and consumer using that you can get. I think another missed opportunity is people jumping into message forums like Quora or Facebook groups. There's so many niche groups out there online and online communities, mommy blogging websites or personal trainer this or vegan this. There's so many communities online that I think as long as you know that a certain group is your, an option, a revenue option for you, then it's a really great place to go in and, put your foot in the door. And you're not selling, you're not, self-promoting yourself on these online forums, but instead you're offering advice. You're just chiming in, helping somebody out, and, eventually that will lead to them visiting you and checking out your profile and seeing what you're more about.
So to go into one of these communities and to communicate as the brand, that'll generate the interest, where on the other side of the coin, advertising is paid and that's more free. That's an interesting tip. I never thought about that. Are there any offline marketing strategies that are still worth investing in?
Yeah, I think that especially if we're going to talk on the topic of small brands, I think local community is so very important. I think hosting events locally, at the same time partnering with other like-minded brands in your local community is huge. I've seen a lot of companies do local gift guides and kind of, I'll include you if you include me sort of a thing, partnering with a nonprofit to have people come to your store and feel good about shopping there. There's so many different things you can do off technology that is still very, very well induced. Yeah.
Interesting. And the biggest thing that I think that small businesses really struggle with is, first, the amount of time that it takes, when they're approaching this. Also, the daunting size of how many avenues that there are to go down. Do you know of any good, content strategy guides or, ways that somebody can get off on the right foot, so to say?
Sure. I think that's when the internet comes into play, and a simple Google search can really, really help you out. There's so many giant content hubs, like HubSpot, for example, that have so many wonderful ebooks and online courses and things like that can really teach you something and get you started on the right foot. As you said, there's so many downloads that kind of force you to create that brand guideline that I mentioned earlier. Really write that mission statement, figure out who you are as a company up front, and kind of figure out where you want to go before you invest dollars and really put all your eggs in one basket.
No, that makes sense, because at the end of the day, time is finite, money is finite. You really need to figure out the right path to market. There's a lot going on right now as far as brands kind of honing in on maybe not their customer demographic, but owning a subject. So Chick-fil-A, very Christian based.
Sure.
What do you think as far as brands moving away from being the every person company and kind of putting their flag down as far as their social positions?
Sure. I say amen to that. Honestly, I think that companies can't be something for everyone, but they can be something really important to someone. I think that a good example of that is an event that I was at a few years ago. Sarah Michelle Gellar was a guest speaker there, and she had just started a baking company called Food Stirs, and it's kind of a disrupting business that's trying to take on the Betty Crockers of the world and just produce regular baking products. And someone from the audience asked her, are you going to create a gluten-free version or branch into that segment? And her answer was really straightforward and just a simple no. She's like, I'm creating this and I'm really proud to create this product. That doesn't mean I need to create something for that niche. There are baking brands and there are, companies that make that and do that really, really well. But the second that I take my focus off what I'm trying to create to try to cater to somebody else is when I'm going to stumble and when I'm going to hit roadblocks. And so I think really figuring out who you are is the most important thing you can do. And that target consumer really sets you up for success, because if it's much easier to target to one specific niche of people. You can have more concentrated messaging. You can have more customized messages. You can really, people feel related to you because they're like, wow, you're speaking to me specifically versus this very wide net that people were originally casting.
Now, as far as social media goes, how should a brand kind of conduct themselves on social media with that social position? Because, we're seeing right now a lot of brands kind of chiming in on the Popeyes chicken sandwich thing. There's always something going on where a brand's contributing, but that could get somebody in a lot of hot water, with a lot of people now. So how do you know the guidelines when interacting online like that?
Yikes. That's a really good question. I think that the most important thing that a company can be is just 100% transparent with their audience. I think that audiences are very smart and they're very quick to call you out on any sort of lies or anything that if you say one thing and do another, this social media is the first place that people will complain and take fire to it. So I think that if a company is going to put their flag in the ground and stand for something, I think it's a very big conversation that everyone at the company is on the same page with it, and that it is something that you're willing to fight for. And really, it's going to push your brand messaging and make people love your brand more. And there's a way to, say things respectfully, of course, and, go about it on thinner ice. I think that we live in a very sensitive community and world, and so unfortunately, and because of that, I think that there's a way to make your beliefs known without stepping on too many toes.
Interesting. And so, as far as the landscape of independent retail and small retail across the country, even independent brands, how can something like a shopping mall be affected now? Because we're seeing the large companies go out of business left and right. We're seeing these town centers changing. How do you feel that the world's going to change as far as 2020 on for these small retailers around the country?
I think it all comes from a place of we've all sort of gained this millennial mentality of I mean, to put it frankly, I think that we're a really spoiled consumer now. I think that we expect top of the line service. We expect to be treated special and not as a number anymore. I think that a lot of the failing shopping malls or giant department stores like Macy's and places that are closing storefronts is because they lost what their user was. They lost that person along their customer journey. And instead, smaller brands that were able to have those touch points and make you loyal to them were stealing them away. So I think create a brand that people love and want to promote, and cater to that 1% of people who really adore you, and they're going to become your advocates.
Since you've dealt with so many different small businesses, if we can end on kind of one key component that makes a brand successful, what would you say is that one key component that a small business should focus on when building a brand in 2020?
I think if you're building a brand next year in 2020, the number one thing you can do is bring a story to your brand. Bring the human element to your brand. If you're creating this really beautiful product, let's say, talk about the product and talk about why it's great or why it might change your life. But more importantly, talk about all of the weeks or years that it took you to build this product. Talk about what happened in your life that inspired you to build this company. I think take people on this journey with you and be honest with them, and people will love you and your brand a lot more than the product. And whether or not they can afford it or buy it, they might refer it to somebody who can. And so I think the biggest thing a brand can do next year is simply be honest, be upfront, share the story, take people behind the scenes, and really show us behind the curtain.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your insight. I think that, that one aspect of developing that story and that voice is really going to make a lot of brands stand out amongst the crowd. But if anybody wants to connect with you, we're going to include the information below. So hopefully they'll reach out. And if you could kind of leave us with one piece, what would you be kind of optimistic about in 2020? What one thing is going to change the world?
Well, I think the biggest thing that's going to change the world is that so many companies are being forced to make more conscious efforts and more ethical and better business decisions. So I think what's really, really is exciting is to see these long-time companies really coming forward and creating maybe more reusable products or more, using more ethically sourced ingredients or things like that. So for me, that's what I'm optimistic about. It's really exciting for me to see these companies changing the world in one way or another. And, it's not for every brand, not every brand can do it, but I think a lot of people can be excited about it. So
sustainability is definitely a movement that I think everybody can get behind. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
It was very good to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Great speaking with you too. Thank you so much.